Francis podcast. My name is Johnny Jones. This is Patches Kaplan. We're here to break down last week and talk about the AP poll and some other relevant college football news. How are we doing, Patches? Where do you want to
Doing good,
start?
Johnny. I'm excited for this week. You know, the knot.com, it's a common wedding website, said that this upcoming Saturday was the number one wedding weekend of the year. And I don't think I can explain in words how upset I would be if I had to attend a wedding this weekend or get married this weekend with how important the games are.
Awful. It kind of makes me think of, I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about last weekend was the week where like you look at the slate and people are like, go apple picking, do stuff like that because it's a bad slate and end up being one of the craziest days. So it's just weird how like sometimes the best weeks kind of fall flat, but the weeks where like you think you've got no matchups end up being incredible.
That's one of the things I want to talk about when we go into this week's games, because usually you and I pick about 6 games, but this week I have 8 that I would like to talk about. Yep. We won't dive into them quite yet, but most of the spreads range from 3 points to 5 points. And to your point, you know, we had so many upsets that were 20 points, 23 points, 14 points with Tennessee, Arkansas. It only makes me believe that we're going to see who the real deal is this upcoming weekend and who's a fraudulent team. With the spreads being that close, I would bet every dollar I have that not all of these games are 3 or 5 points. There's got to be a blowout somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
But really quick, on the year, we have a new leader in our Cheesecake Challenge. You currently have 12 points, an unbelievable pick by Syracuse, the most disrespected quarterback in the United States.
It's Colin McCord.
He's an absolute dog.
People act like he like just fell off the face of the planet after last year.
He's got to be leading the nation or pretty close to it in yards per game.
Dude, he's throwing the heck out there.
On the flip side, your picks for the week against the spread have gone down and down. Your back-to-back weeks with 1 win. You are now 19 for 43. I am 22 for 43.
Okay, I'm still within striking distance.
So last week we had for games UNLV versus Syracuse, Mizzou versus A&M, Clemson versus FSU, Tennessee versus Arkansas, Michigan versus Huskies, UCF versus Florida. You and I both picked Syracuse. You picked Mizzou, which you should be pretty embarrassed about because that was an insanely bad game.
Yeah, it was tough. That was. I said they were frauds, but I still thought that game was going to be closer.
I don't really know what to make of that game. Like, they did not look like a good team. They didn't look like a top 25 team. They didn't look like a top 50 team. I think it's absolutely terrible. Or A&M looks really, really good right now.
I think it's also just like we talk about how we look at college football and like a team like A&M loses so early in the year and we're so quick to just write them off for the rest of the season. We're like, right now they're hitting their stride. You know, this is Mike Elko's first season. He's getting the guys going. Guys are buying in, and they're really starting to play really good football right now.
See, that's the thing I love about early season losses, and I disagree with a lot of people on this, and I truly believe that if A&M goes and starts running the table, right, they have LSU in 2 weeks, and then it's very likely if they beat LSU, which they will be a 0-loss SEC team going into the SEC championship. They'll be the only one. So they're automatic. They get an automatic bid, probably a repeat against Texas, or they will most likely play Texas, or they play Texas at the end of the year. Nonetheless, they're most likely going to win or play in the SEC game. Yeah. Where I'm going with this is if it's a toss-up between Notre Dame and Texas A&M, I would be pissed if A&M doesn't get in over Notre Dame. And everyone always argues, do head-to-head matchups not count? Of course they count. First week of the year, Labor Day weekend, they shouldn't count nearly as much as they do in November. And I always hate that argument of like head-to-head trumps all. It shouldn't. There was 11 other games played in between them.
Yeah, you got to look at the full resume. And it's like head-to-head has to mean something, but it also has to mean something that it's at the beginning of the season. Like teams,
I think it's a tiebreaker.
Yeah, no, I think teams really progress throughout the season. Teams get better, guys get hurt. Teams really evolve, and I think you're right. That would be a crazy situation where you're picking between those two teams.
Yeah. So then we had Clemson minus 14.5. You and I both lost that one. Vegas knew something we didn't. FSU ended up covering that one. They lost by 14, so we lost on a half point.
That was a bizarre game.
It was. 7 field goals for Clemson?
Yeah.
That's just weird. Tennessee, Arkansas, I don't think anyone predicted that one. No. Nico looked overwhelmed by the size of the moment. The Huskies smoked UM. Everyone thought for a second that Michigan had a nice quarterback. He was terrible. That team is terrible. The defense is not as good as people think. The offense is garbage. Gosh, I hate them. And then Florida. I threw that one on this list last week because I'm kind of rooting for them, and I wanted to throw them on this list for this upcoming week. And two games I took from that, or excuse me, two things that came from that Florida UCF game. UCF was not nearly as good as we thought. They were
No,
never an actual playoff contender. That's embarrassing for people to think, and myself included. I thought they were.
they're
So
playing.
Colorado's
Yeah.
win does not look nearly as good on them. Also, is Tennessee in another upset alert playing Florida this week?
Yeah, no, Tennessee. I like. Just I think the big thing about that team is for years they've waited for like their defense to match the offense. Like like the Hendon Hooker years. Before that, they've had these explosive offenses with defenses always kind of falling a bit short. And now I feel like they have the defense, and now just Nico's so young. He's
Yeah.
so young. Like, and I think we saw that this past weekend where he just wasn't quite there. Like that was it 4th and 5. Like the end the games ran out of bounds. It's like
I've seen so many young quarterbacks make that exact mistake.
it's just like it's stuff like that where like he's just not at the point where the rest of the team needs him to be at. And I think they got to play Bama. I think they got to play Georgia. Like the rest of the season, like the SEC is a mess right now. Texas is the only undefeated team. We'll get into it later, but the SEC is crazy. And there's going to be some really good teams that get left out of the playoff because they drop 2-3 down the stretch. Just because,
we're going to see really good teams with 4+ losses this year.
Yeah.
So jumping right into the AP poll, the reason I want to talk to you about this, Johnny, this week a little bit is because I don't know what they're putting in their coffee, but I would like some because they're not thinking clearly when they make this poll. There is just no way that these high-end officials, these former ADs, these average college football fans are looking and watching these games and then actually ranking them with no bias.
There's so much stress put on like how they rank the teams in the summer. Like there's so much stress for them to like keep that continuity, which is ridiculous because I think you should watch the games and then make an educated decision based off that. Where it's like
it should be almost reset every single week.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. That's how it should be. But it's like we had Michigan 5 preseason and they have looked awful, but because they were 5, they're still going to get in. Like it just kind of this stuff is just crazy. And one thing I've said to you about 10,000 times this week is like, how do we have 27 teams in the top 25 poll? Like, how do we have 3 number?
I just don't see,
ranked
and we'll talk about. I know which one you're referring to. Obviously, number 18
and 11. Yeah,
but I don't know how you look at that. Look at everyone's schedule and be like, these teams are pound for pound the exact same in our eyes.
Yeah,
and that's why I disrespect this AP poll so bad. In that I really only care about the college football bowl because this one means absolutely nothing to me, and there's no parallels between this one and the college football playoff. That I'm like, what is even the point? Obviously, the point is I click on it every single day. Sunday morning, I it's one of the first things I read. But is there any disagreeing in top 4, 1 through 4? We have Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State.
I think you had to do that based on who lost and who won. Like you can't. Like I know a lot of people think Texas and Ohio State are in this kind of just this tier by themselves, and then you can say what you want about Oregon and Penn State, but they've won every game they've played, and I don't think you can punish them for that. So I think you got to reward teams for winning games and punish teams for losing games. And I think the top 4 really shows that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think 1 and 2 can be flipped depending on geographics, but 3 and 4 I think is really spot on. I do think Oregon's slightly a better team than Penn State right now. I'm excited to see them against Ohio State, but
they've shown a little more. And I worry about Oregon because Penn State's defense is just suffocating teams right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Oregon's as talented on the defensive side of the ball, but they've shown it on offense. I think they've been more impressive, so I do agree with the 3-4 there.
Yeah, I think that Penn State belongs in the top 4. I think they're a really good team. You won't like what I have to say at the end of the podcast, but we'll touch that later. 5 through 10, we have our first 1-loss team is Georgia, which is interesting because they are a few steps ahead of a team that beat them just 2 weeks ago. We have Miami at 6, Bama at 7, Tennessee at 8, Ole Miss at 9, and Clemson at 10. So it's crazy. You have, out of the 5 through 10, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 out of those 6 teams are 1-loss teams.
Yeah, the tough thing is, like, I really don't know where you want to put Miami because, I just said you can't punish a team for winning games. At the same time, they've been pretty damn close the past 2 weeks. Like they've been, they were trying to lose.
Florida State got punished for winning games last year like nothing I've ever seen.
Yeah, No, it's crazy. But the Miami thing is like they should have lost what to Virginia Tech 2 weeks ago. They
And
should have
then,
lost
yeah,
Cal
Cal.
last week, but they don't. And Cam Ward he's pulling a rabbit out of the
He's
hat,
really,
man.
really good, but like at the same
Yeah,
time, they haven't played anyone that's overly talented.
yeah.
You
No,
know,
they
like
haven't.
they, it's not unlikely. And as we talk about the playoffs in the next few weeks, it's not unlikely that a group of 5 teams gets in the top 4 spots ahead of the ACC or the Big 12.
Yeah,
Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Clemson drops one and still somehow makes the conference championship and wins it. That
yeah.
they're obviously the
They got
ACC
a
champ,
bye.
but they don't get a top 14.
Yeah, no, that's going to be confusing how they do it based on
It's just assumed it's the 4 best conference winners. I always thought it was the 4 power fours, but in hindsight, it makes sense. If there is an undefeated AAC team that's dominated everyone, what we thought of JMU, then it's not unlikely that they could get one of the top 4 spots.
Yeah,
I think 5 through 10 is a good list. I don't love. There's a few teams on here I don't love. Ole Miss, I don't really get. I haven't watched all that much of their games, but I don't love the way they play. Bama,
yeah.
I think, is fraudulent. I thought they played really, really good for Georgia. And just like BYU did the same week, they scored, I think, 4 touchdowns in 5 drives. No one could stop them. And then they scored, I think, 2 more touchdowns the rest of the game. So their scripted plays were there. I lost a little bit of respect for that team with the way Malachi Moore, their captain, acted at the end of the game.
Yeah, that was tough. And he came out today and said that he's blaming it kind of on the D coordinators making the defense feel anxious, being late in with calls. Like he's doing all the excuses in the
I
book.
just don't like how Kalen DeBoer covered for him, saying, he was, he held our back the entire offseason. It's time for us to defend him and blah, blah, blah.
I really don't know how you see Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee right now because I think those teams are all better than Ole Miss and Clemson. I think Bama's
Yeah.
defense took a step back this year. I think Nick Saban doesn't lose that game. He was the best in the country at they would go have an emotional win and get on their ass all week, and then they'd come out and beat the crap out of Vanderbilt or a team like that or like Kentucky. So I think that was, but at the same time, we've been kissing Tennessee's ass all year, and they might not be legit.
No, they might not be. I thought that their win from Oklahoma was a very high quality win. In hindsight, Oklahoma's not a terrible team, but they, as I review their film, they didn't look great in that game.
No,
I thought they looked terrible against Arkansas. Arkansas is just a few plays away from being in the SEC conversation, so it's not okay for us to disrespect them.
Yeah,
it was an amazing win. There's no doubt about that. They should have beat Oklahoma State. They should be, I think, a 1-loss team. They should be in the top 25. It's I'm not surprised that game happened. If you watch the game, I think everyone and their mothers knew that was going to happen the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think putting Georgia at 5 is necessary. At a neutral site or even home, I'm taking Georgia to beat Bama. I'm taking Georgia to beat Tennessee. I'm taking Georgia to beat Ole Miss. I'm taking Georgia to beat Clemson. I'd go straight down the list, all the way down to 7.
I agree with that. I know Alabama did beat Georgia, but we're talking about Alabama just lost to Vanderbilt. And no disrespect to Vanderbilt, because this is a different Vanderbilt than the past 10 years. They're going to go down there. But, I do agree with that. Ole Miss Clemson, I think, such a toss-up to me. Ole Miss did look really good this weekend. I think they beat USC 27-3. That was a really big bounce-back game. I still think they're a little fraudulent up front on offense. But and then Clemson just continues to trend in the right direction. Kind of a gross win this week. But, a win's a win's a win. So
yeah, it's going to be tough because they're going to be so unbattle tested going to the end of the year. Like, they'll have Miami, obviously, in the conference championship. And then besides that, everyone's going to compare their single loss. If they win that game, their single loss to the Georgia game. In Georgia, it's not even all that crazy for Georgia to miss the playoffs this year.
No.
And then what happens? You know what I mean? It's so crazy. So then we have a tie at 11 with Iowa State and Notre Dame. We have LSU at 13, BYU at 14, A&M at 15.
Yeah.
And is there any part of you that says LSU, BYU, and A&M should be above Notre Dame or Iowa State?
Yeah, I think BYU is one of the most disrespected teams in the country right now.
Agreed.
They continue to play great football. What they did to Kansas State has gotten dramatically looked over. Yeah. I think they're tough. They spread the ball out. They're playing good football. I have no idea what to feel about LSU right now, but I do think I think Texas A&M should be above at least I don't know. It's the same argument. Iowa State and BYU have just won. I don't really think Iowa State's that great. I don't really trust Matt Campbell. So I don't know, but I think Texas A&M, what they did to Missouri this week, they should be higher than 15. They
Oh, absolutely.
dismantled,
Like I don't
dismantled
understand why
Missouri.
LSU is getting the respect they are. Like they almost lost to South Carolina. They have like practically no decent wins. I don't for the life of me understand why they're so highly ranked. Their schedule is absolutely brutal the rest of the year. They have one loss. I can see them losing 3 more games ending the year with 4 losses and barely
Oh,
making
yeah,
a
the
bowl game.
schedule's brutal.
That's the SEC though. Like that's what it is these years. Nowadays, it's like the conference play is so legit that these old school powerhouses are going to have these crumbling years where they don't have a quarterback and they don't have an elite defense and they just can't keep up and they drop 4 or 5. We're
Yeah.
going to see crazy coach turnovers in our lifetime or the next 10 years or so until they figure this out.
And at LSU, their loss to I was just looking up to USC. That's just gonna age poorly.
Yeah, neutral site. Like they're not a good team. I don't understand that.
No.
They haven't played anyone good. They have a tough schedule. I could see them dropping 4 out of the next 5. You get a little bit choppy going 16 through
Yeah, it's
20, I guess, to call it. So 16, we have Utah.
yeah.
17, we have Boise State. 18, we have K-State. 18, we have Indiana. 18, we have Oklahoma. And I would like to give you the floor to kind of talk about your feelings about picking 3 teams exactly at 18.
Yeah. It's just ridiculous, but I think what also is ridiculous is that how is Oklahoma and Kansas State tied with Indiana? Like, Indiana has you were on them early. I wasn't. So props to you. But Indiana's just continued to impress, whereas Kansas State has a really bad looking loss right now. And then Oklahoma just looked flat all year.
They're giving them the benefit of the doubt. It makes no sense. Like Indiana looks like a really, really good team. In their next 3 games, they have Washington, Nebraska, all 3 at home. So you got to think of it. Their 6-0 record, mostly on the road. It's kind of wild.
Yeah.
So their next 3 games we have, I think they have a bye this week, but it's like Nebraska, Michigan, Washington, Ohio State. And it's not unlikely. It's going to be a tough month, but it's not unlikely they go into Ohio State at 9-0 or 10-0.
No, yeah, I think that Nebraska ones it gets a little tricky, but I do think they're a great team, and I think just to put them in the same category as those other 2 teams is ridiculous. I think Boise State's a really good team. You know, I think they played their ass off against Oregon, and that's their one loss. I think they could be. I think you could argue them in that last category we just would like. I think you could put them up with like LSU and BYU and Texas A&M. Like, how isn't their loss just as good as Texas A&M's? Like, you know,
yeah, the disrespect of them just barely climbing when they're just absolutely dominating and pulling their starters. 6 minutes into the second quarter.
Gentry's been sat 2 second halves, and he's still in those games had like 190 yards on like 13.
It's so crazy what he's
disgusting.
And the fact that he's still 2.5 to 1 to win the Heisman is just kind of blows my mind. And kind of the disrespect that he's getting as a Group 5 player, that has nothing to do with the fact that he's running for historic numbers.
Yeah, and I get what people are like, oh, it's not against anyone. He did it against Oregon. He did it against Oregon, who, if you're going to put them at number 3 in the country, you better respect Ashton Genty's performance against them. I don't know.
Yeah, and I couldn't disagree with that more. So then we have 21 through 25 gets very choppy. You could probably put a lot of different teams in here. There are 2 teams in here that I really, really like. We have 21 Missouri, 22 Pittsburgh, 23 Illinois, 24 Michigan, 25 SMU. And I go back and forth on this because it's like, so I'm looking at it, Michigan's at 24 and they dropped 14 spots over the weekend.
Yeah.
They should have never, ever, ever been ranked 10. There's no way the people who made this poll watched any of Michigan's games and said, that is the 10th best team in the nation.
They should be out of the poll. I don't get how they're still in the poll.
I don't either. They look terrible.
Yeah.
They have one of the worst ranked offenses. They put up the offensive stats, and Michigan was in the mid 120 range for offensive production, scoring per game in some other categories. It was just embarrassing. I do love Pitt at 22. That is not a team I'd want to mess with.
No.
I think that they're in the ACC, correct?
Yeah.
The ACC low-key has some really good talent, and everyone's just assuming it's going to be Miami or Clemson. But how likely is it that Pitt or BC or Syracuse makes a run for it?
It kind of is reminiscent of that Kenny Pickett year where not many people talked about them that first half of the season, and they just kept racking up wins. And at the end of the season, they were just hanging around at the top of the ACC. So, I don't know, but I think they're a really good team. I think Mizzou, get them out of my face. That
Yeah,
was bad.
such
That
a
was
fraudulent team.
that was disgusting. Them and Michigan, get them out of here. I
Yeah.
think Missouri should stay in the poll just because it's one loss, but I think Michigan get out of here. I do really like I do really like Pitt, but I also really like Illinois and SMU. I think Illinois had a gritty loss to Penn State in a crazy environment, and I think they're going to continue just to play really tough ball. I think Luke Altmaier, he doesn't turn the ball over a ton, and I think they just do enough on defense to kind of get in these rock fights with teams. And then I think SMU, their one loss is to BYU, who I just praised like 5 minutes ago. I think SMU is playing really good ball. I think they could be up for the ACC this year. Like they're you know what I mean?
Like, yeah, that's like another thing. Like the ACC, everyone's just assuming it's Clemson or
Miami.
Miami, but like it's not unlikely for Clemson nor Miami to drop one, and one of the other teams squirts in there. Yeah, no, there's a team in here that didn't get included. It is my new favorite team of the year.
Let's see it.
I texted you about them.
Yep.
I really think that this team can make the playoff. Army.
Yeah.
They are 5-0. So is Navy. So this is crazy. And I saw a quick clip of it on, I think, Barstool's Unnecessary Roughness, where they were talking about the playoff gets announced, and then the following week is technically like a bye week, but that's the week Army plays Navy.
Yeah.
And so the winner of the AAC could get in.
Yeah.
And I don't see why they wouldn't. If Army or Navy goes undefeated, they are 100% in because they would be the only Group 5 team that's undefeated. You'd give it to Boise. I think you'd have to give it to Boise State. So you'd go two of those teams. You would go 1-1 from the ACC in the Big 12, and then you go 4-4 from the SEC in the Big 10. And where I'm going with this is that, one, if Army goes undefeated with a win over Notre Dame, which I don't think is unlikely because it's an away game, Notre Dame's not that good, and Army is a very tough team to stop right now.
Yeah.
It'd be very hard and unconstitutional to keep Army out of the playoff.
No.
But what's crazy about it is that they could play for the A8 Arm. Let me try to formulate.
They'd play for the conference championship. Army, Navy, they both go undefeated.
Yes.
Play for the conference championship. Then I'm pretty
Just
sure
literally the next week do it again.
But the playoff committee, I think, decides after championship week.
Yes.
So one could get in. Then they would play for nothing the next week.
Yeah, like that's such a crazy thought.
That's
like I don't even know. I don't even know what I would do in that situation. Like I'm assuming the odds of that happening are slim to none. I think that the ACC has some good teams, but it very well could.
That happens in Massachusetts high school football because you can play Thanksgiving and the state championship. It happened last year with St. John's.
Well, I remember UNH played Maine the end of the year, of course, beat them, and then had to go. UNH had either the next week or the week after that in the playoffs had to go right back up to Maine and play them again and beat them again in 2013. And it was awesome to see because, we hate that team. And but it was funny because it was like you literally play them, took a breather, and then it was like Thanksgiving, and then you played them again the week after.
Yeah.
So the AP poll is, I think, I don't know. I like the majority of the teams on there, Johnny, but I don't love.
I still like the strategy, like going in, we're just gonna reward these teams because we like them in the preseason. I don't know.
I look at it and I'm like, even like, and I hope people don't stand outside my door with pitchforks here. Like Texas has a good win over Michigan. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
Besides that, they haven't done anything like that's overly dominating. They haven't beat anyone yet. Like, don't get me wrong, they're gonna get battle tested, and they're gonna show us why they're the number one team in the country. But both them and Ohio State have not really played anyone. Texas has more than Ohio State, but I think that Ohio State is the team to beat. I think that they should be the favorite to win the Natty. And that's where I'm going to kind of progress into this upcoming week. We have some absolutely massive games. I want to talk about our slate for this week.
Yeah.
We have we have Texas versus OU in the Red River Showdown.
Yep.
We have your Nittany Lions against USC.
Yep.
We have Arizona versus BYU.
Mm-hmm.
Florida versus Tennessee, a very big rivalry game. We have Ohio State versus Oregon. We have Ole Miss versus LSU. We have Iowa State versus WVU. And I wanted to include that one just because the spread stuck out to me. And then we have Kansas State versus Colorado. So starting with Texas versus OU. Last year, OU almost knocked Texas' season completely off the rails, kind of beat them on a few lucky plays. If you remember, they had a goal line interception.
Yeah.
They had a couple really nice field goals. Right now, Texas is a 14-point favorite. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's been bland all year, and I think Texas is gonna get a very big win, a much needed big win for them just because, as you said, they haven't Michigan's kind of fizzled out, but that was a good win. But I think they're gonna get another big win, and
Yeah.
I think they're gonna kinda dismantle Oklahoma. I don't
I
really like
agree with you. I think no matter who they start at quarterback, it's going to be Texas's game thick and through. It's going to be like the year they beat them 49-0. I don't think it'll be that dramatic, but I do see a game that's much more than 14 points. I can see probably closer to 28. I don't see how Oklahoma's going to run the ball or do anything
no.
against Texas, and I think Texas is going to score kind of effortlessly against Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about your Nittany Lions at all?
No.
Why?
Because of what USC has shown this year.
You don't think that it's a wounded dog that needs to eat?
No, in beginning of the week, if we recorded, I would have been kind of more leaning towards what you're saying right now. I think USC is in a corner, and if they don't win this, they're going to have a really bad record this year. But at the same time, I think Penn State's defense is way too good. I think they just slowly just suffocate teams. They just kind of they have up front. They're so talented with Carter and Dennis Sutton and Zach.
You think if USC puts up somehow, some way, 35 points, though, Penn State's going to be able to match that and beat it?
I don't think they're going to be able to put up 35 points, and I do think they will be able to match that because I think they're going to run the ball down USC's.
My only concern is when you have a team that's as dynamic as USC can be. They're not dynamic, but they can be dynamic with an offensive-minded coach. All it takes is 2 or 3 quick drives where you hit a couple of out routes and you run a reverse, you score a touchdown, and then catching up on a 2-3 possession lead is not easy.
Yeah, but if you rewatch that USC Michigan game, Michigan ran a 2-minute drill running the ball. And if Penn State's strength is anything on offense, they've got 2 running backs. Nick Singleton is back this week, and both those guys are just studs. So I think they'd be able to run the ball, and I think Drew Aller does way more than Alex Orji could do in that game. So they can run the ball just as well as Michigan, and I think at the same time, Drew Aller is going to make a couple plays that Alex Orji couldn't. So I just think
I agree with you, but I'm going to take USC in this just because I do think that it's do or die, and I never like a team that's do or die. I don't want to play those types of teams because they're scary. You never know what they're going to do. Side note, did you see the defensive tackle who quit at USC?
no.
On that 66-yard run on 4th and 2 that Michigan scored.
Yeah.
His name's Bear something or something Bear. And he was a 3-tech, absolutely blown off the ball into the linebacker. And that's what opened the gap for that running back one for 65 yards.
Yeah.
And he got absolutely smashed on social media. He came out, got super defensive, and then redshirted for the year. And he stopped playing.
That's wild.
Yeah,
That's crazy. I didn't see that. That is wicked soft.
Yeah. So then I do think that USC has a chance. They've shown 2 games. The USC played Minnesota really, really hard. Our boy Max, just showed his grittiness in that game, and it was awesome to see. But I don't think that USC is a bad team. I think that they're just kind of missing this it factor right now, and they're going to catch it eventually in a game. Hopefully it's not against your Nittany Lions. I think it might be against your Nittany Lions.
I don't think so. I think I'm taking Penn State big time this week.
Well, good luck to you. We have BYU versus Arizona. BYU is a 4-point favorite. Once again, and the reason I wanted to include these games is because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of the 8 games, Johnny, are under 4 points or more. Or less, excuse me.
Yeah.
And it's just very hard for me to believe these massive matchups are all going to be 3-point, field goal type games.
No, I know. The spread kind of scares me because I don't know why it's as close as it is. I'm really high in BYU. BYU dismantled Kansas State, and Kansas State dismantled Arizona. I think Arizona is just not strong enough on the defensive side of the ball. They could. It's kind of like what you're saying with USC. They could catch lightning in a bottle from Fafita and the McMillan. Like those 2 guys are super talented, but I just think overall BYU is just too good for them.
Yeah, I would agree. This is one of those. I think everyone's not quite buying into BYU yet, but they're going to be the team to beat in the Big 12 very, very soon.
Yeah.
I could see them dropping 28 points before halftime, and Arizona just struggling to keep up. That spread, one of those things is does someone know something I don't? I don't think they do. I think that this is going to be at least a 14-point game.
Yeah.
We have Florida versus Tennessee, a big-time rivalry game. If you remember last year, it ended up with a fist fight as time ran out of regulation. Tennessee's coming off a terrible loss against Arkansas. They looked dull. They looked ill-prepared. They looked young. They looked immature. On the flip side, Florida's coming off a pretty good win at UCF. They're 3-2 on the year. They're
Yeah.
1 or 2 games away from being bowl eligible, which with their schedule you would consider as a huge W for the season. Are they on upset alert?
No, I don't think so. Just because I think Josh Heupel is going to have to prove something to the playoff committee right now. I think he's going to have to go out. I think that loss, he just doesn't have that much room to fail right now. And I think he's going to go out and try to really embarrass Florida just because that next week he has to play Alabama. He goes through kind of a brutal stretch of Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi State sucks, but then Georgia. So I think this is one of the games where he has to prove something. 15 and what's the spread? 15 and a half.
15 and a half.
That's a lot of points. I think it's 17 points.
Yeah, I think Florida finds a way to cover. I think they're catching their stride. I like Billy Napier. I think on the podcast I've said otherwise probably 8 or 10 times, but I am rooting for the guy. I don't think that they win, but I think you count the Gators. If they lose this game by 10 or less, I'm counting this as a win in the morale column, I guess. So I'm going to pick Florida, just basically out of hope. We have, I think, what everyone is most excited for the entire weekend. Ohio State versus Oregon. Ohio State's a 3-point favorite in Oregon, which means that at home they'd be probably closer to a touchdown favorite, or at neutral site they'd be probably closer to a 5-point favorite. What's your opinion on this game? Where does this game go?
Oh, I wouldn't touch this game with a 10-foot pole. I'm not because I think Autzen a tough place to play, but both teams are super talented. Part of me is like Ohio State's been so good this year. I think them and Texas have been the two most impressive teams by far. They've got so many options on offense, and I think on defense, they're super talented up front. So I think there's just such a good team. But I think Oregon really hasn't played their best ball. I think Dylan Gabriel's played better in the past than he has at Oregon. I think this is the game he really puts it together and comes up with a signature win at home. I'm an Oregon fan. I can't pick against the Ducks. I'm going to go with the Ducks. I'm pretty nervous, but I think they're really going to put it all together. I don't really trust Will Howard too much. I don't think
I don't think you need to trust Will Howard in this situation.
Yeah.
I think with Quinson Judkins and Trayvon Henderson, there's not much you need to do besides hand the ball to them. I think that they run the ball 35 times this weekend. I think that they absolutely dominate the line of scrimmage. Their O-line's not great in pass protection, but I think that Chip Kelly will do a good enough job to get the ball out of Will Howard's hands into these absolutely ridiculous wide receivers that they have. I think OSU drops the hammer on Oregon. As you know, you and I differ on this team, just like Penn State. I think that Oregon is one of those teams that's all smoke, no substance.
We'll see.
They haven't beaten anyone overly impressive this year. Neither is Ohio State, but the respect that they're getting in the kind of pedestal that people put them on because they're Oregon, they look cool, and Dan Lanning's an awesome coach. But like I'm going back to last year where they got outcoached and outbodied by Washington twice in the same year. It's hard for me to believe that Dan Lanning has what it takes to win these massive games, even if they're at home. I got to take Ohio State. I'm going to take them in the points. If I was to bet this game, I'd actually spread it to about 9. I think that this is a 10-point game. I think the second time that they play, either in the playoffs or in the conference championships, going to be a lot closer. But I think that Ohio State's had this one circled on their schedule because this is what's standing in between them and the conference championship. And I think they do really, really well. I think that Oregon struggles to move the ball a little bit. I'm going to take Ohio State -3 here.
Okay.
We have Ole Miss and LSU, two teams that I don't really have that much of a strong opinion for. I will be not disappointed if either one makes the playoff. I'll be a little bit surprised at this point. I think Ole Miss is a minus odds to make the playoffs, Johnny.
Yeah.
I don't think they're a great team. I know LSU ain't a great team.
Yeah. I'm going to – what's the spread? What did you say the spread was?
-3, field goal for Ole Miss.
I'm going to have to go with Ole Miss even though I don't like them. And I said earlier in the podcast, I think they're kind of fraudulent, and I still stand by that. But I think LSU is very fraudulent. I think that was an embarrassing loss in the beginning of the season to USC. I think they should have won that game. USC hasn't looked great. And then what else have they done this year? I know they beat USC, who USC's kind of been a scrappy team that played tough ball. But
very inconsistently.
Yeah,
exactly. You're saying that because they beat Kentucky. They didn't beat Kentucky or even beat Kentucky by a touchdown. Everyone's opinion on their USC win, which they won with almost time running out, isn't even regarded as a good win.
No. I really think LSU is kind of a disappointing team, so I'm going to go with Ole Miss. I think they're too talented.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I still think that they are playing for a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Art's a really good quarterback. They have some offensive potency there. I don't think that LSU can keep up, and I think that Ole Miss drops the bomb on them in terms of points scored. I think this is one of those 48-45 type games, but I think Ole Miss gets the win and covers. We have a Big 12 matchup, right? A WVU is in the Big 12, correct?
Yes.
We have West Virginia versus Iowa State. Iowa State is 5-0, a top 10 team, top 11 team in the country according to the AP poll. Where do you sit on this one?
Going West Virginia. I'm going West Virginia. I really like Garrett Green. I think he's a great quarterback. I liked him ever since. I know they lost to Penn State, but I think he's kind of just a winner. I think he freaking run when he gets running, that whole offense starts going. And I don't know. I just don't really trust Iowa State right now. I think you got to respect that they're undefeated, but I just really don't think they're as good as they are.
I think it's a scrappy win. I think Iowa State gets the win. I think they cover by more than 7.
Okay.
I think that this is one of those seasons where Dan Campbell has his eyes on leaving, and he needs a 10-win season to do so.
That's true.
So I could see him punching out a really good year and then getting one of the coveted jobs in the SEC or Big Ten next year. So I think that he somehow figures out a way to win this game even on the road, goes 6-0 on the season and kind of leads the Big 12. And then finally, we have Kansas State versus Colorado. Kansas State's coming off some good wins. Colorado's coming off, I believe, a bye week.
Yeah.
Are you buying the Buffalo train yet, or are you selling, or where are you standing on that one?
I'm buying in the fact that I think they have a path, but I'm selling there. I don't think they're good enough overall to make the playoff. I think they're going to lose this game. I think Kansas State's going to cover. I like Kansas State. I know people are just so low on them just because of how bad they lost to BYU is, but I think BYU is a really good team. And I think they've been impressive enough in the other games, especially like that Oklahoma State and Arizona. Both those wins, both those teams were ranked at the time. I know you can say what you want about them now, but those were ranked unranked matchups, which I think matters. And they kind of dismantled both of them. And I just think they're too good. I think overall they're a lot stronger than Colorado is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they run the ball all over Colorado. I think that they're going to be able to get after Shedeur Sanders very easily. Everyone's saying that the O-line has done a 180 and they're actually really good. We'll see against the defensive end.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to say that.
They're solid defense. I think that game's not overly close. The -4 for K-State doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I thought if you told me that spread, or if you asked me what I thought the spread would have been 10 days ago, I probably would have said 14, maybe 13. Yeah. So the -4 makes me a little bit concerned, but I don't think this is a close game. I think that Kansas State drops over 35 points. I think Colorado stays under 20.
It's just that Colorado beat UCF
yes,
in such a fashion they did, and now UCF doesn't look that good. They just lost to Florida.
Yeah, no, and everyone was saying that Colorado's so back, and everyone who's buying that hype train is now back better than ever. But like you look at it now, that UCF win does not look nearly as good even 7 days later.
If they win this, I'll start to buy in because the rest of their schedule is not that hard. But I don't think they win this game.
I agree. And Johnny, now we're on to our cheesecake picks of the week.
Yes.
I know you got one lock and loaded.
Yes, I've got West Virginia. I just said it. I think they win. I think that's a gritty win. I don't think Iowa State's as good as they are. And I think West Virginia is I think they're one of those teams that they just exist to ruin team seasons. And I think they'll ruin Iowa State's this weekend.
I don't want you to get mad at me, and I don't want to ruin our friendship over this pick.
Dude, this is the second time you've done this.
Yeah,
this is the second time you've done this.
I think
no.
I don't think Penn State's them yet. I think that they're missing something. They're a team that's scoring very, very late in the game, and everyone's assuming that these wins are better than they are. I don't think they're there yet. I think that USC, like I told you, a wounded dog is not a dog you want to mess with. I think USC is fighting for their life in the Big Ten. I think that Lincoln Riley is, to his surprise, is fighting for his reputation as an offensive-minded coach. I see it being a gun draw type fight where they're both dropping crazy amounts of plays, crazy amounts of scoring. I don't see a world where Penn State can keep up with USC. If it goes the way I think it can, I think that USC gets the win by a field goal. It's going to be the type of game, in my opinion, it's going to be a 38-35 game where the last person to touch the ball is going to win the game because they're going to hit a field goal. And it's going to be USC.
I could sit here and argue about that all day. I'll just let them play it out. I already said what I thought earlier.
I'll be the first to bite my tongue on next Tuesday when Penn State wins, if Penn State wins. But, I think that a good win against USC will project them for a good rest of the season. But, yes, they beat Illinois, and yes, the game wasn't all that close. But, they had a touchdown with, 4 minutes left to make it a 2-possession game?
Yeah, they did, but
you stop that, and it's a 14-7 game, and everyone's opinion on their offense and their defense has changed a little bit. The difference between a 21-7 and a 14-7 win, against a barely ranked top 25 team is a massive difference, in my opinion.
Yeah, you watched that game though. That could have been a 40-7 game.
I think so too. I think it could have been 35-7 pretty easily, but it
Yeah.
wasn't.
No, yeah, that's right.
And that is the concerning part. I don't think that this is a big week for upsets. I think you and I both missed our calling with last week's upsets.
Yeah.
And I don't think that college football fans have the heart to deal with another week like that.
No. I think underdogs lose this week.
I'd agree. I think this is the week of the favorites. I'm super excited to watch it. Johnny, we'll cut you short so you can go enjoy your bachelor party, and we'll be texting this Saturday.
Okay. See you, dude.
All right, dude.
Bye.